One of the biggest takeaways for me with all of the Matrix movies is the power of love and covenant in relationship. And so I want to explain some of the symbolism I noticed between the Matrix love story with Neo and Trinity and the biblical love story between Christ and the bride, in hopes that it will continue to help us to unlock some of the hidden mysteries of not only the deep, pure, honest, vulnerable, unbreakable, downright reckless love that you are destined to experience, but also maybe it'll help us to understand why it's been so difficult and how to finally break free from the repeating relationship patterns so that we can experience our love of a lifetime. I will also share some of just the fun facts and just more symbolism that I gathered from the documentary film, as well as some parallels I noticed that kind of helped me to understand more of how the glitches in the Matrix work, where there can be the same energies at play behind the scenes, but then they manifest in a slightly different way. And so without further ado, let's jump right in. Now, right away, we see that the same story that we saw play out 18 years ago when we first saw the very first Matrix is replaying again. And I'm going to talk a little bit later, like I mentioned, about more of these parallels and how even though the faces in the story, or another way to say that is the human avatars or the flesh suits that host the spirit, which is you, even though the outside can look differently, it's still the same energies, the same spirits at play. And the movie calls this the loop or the hamster wheel, where a person is stuck in this repeated cycle where, like a person on a hamster wheel or a treadmill, they have the illusion of moving forward because they're moving, but in all actuality, they're just running in place. And so how can you know if you're in a relational karmic loop? Well, you'll see different faces on the partners, but the experience, the feeling, what it does to your heart, it will be the same. And it doesn't even have to play out energetically in just like, intimate relationships. It could play out where the energies show up in your family members. And so again, it's the glitch in the Matrix where the scene looks similar, but it's changed just a bit. It's almost like a deja vu experience in that even though, again, the faces are different, the loop is still the same. I'll give you an example of this type of nostalgia. And it's important to know that if you're still very unconscious and you're just going through the motions, you may miss this and just find yourself in, the same spot again, the same disappointment, the same drama, the same heartache as the last time, only with a different person. Or in some cases, you may even repeat with the same person, which is even more of a sign of, the zombie-like way that you are moving about in the earth currently. And so when this happens, there will be the same type of conflicts or similar conflicts, only they play out slightly different. So the roles may be reversed. So say the last time the guy dumped you, whereas the guy before him, you were the one who ended things. Either way, the plot and the storyline still remains. It's just slightly altered. Now, another telltale sign, pun intended, are the synchronicities that you notice where, the same ones will show up in this new relationship that showed up in the last relationship. And because it's a loop, you respond to them the same way every time. So take prophetic words, for example. You can think every time you meet someone new that, oh my gosh, this is the one who the prophetic word was about. Or you can take, other synchronicities like repeating numbers. Now, for us in the Matrix that we are currently in, the repeating numbers, they appear like, 555 or 1111, or, you always seem to see 333 on the clock. You always seem to see 222, things like that. That's the way the numbers work for us in this matrix. Whereas in all of the Matrix documentaries, 1 through 4, they have their own repeating numbers that looks like digital code. Now, another sign could be repeating animals or insects. Now, in the movie, it's the black cat that walked by twice. And it was explained that the deja vu that Neo experienced, because remember, they're like, was it the same cat or was it a cat that looked similar? That glitch was representative of the fact that they had changed something discreetly. That though it may still look the same to the naked eye, it's not the same. And we see in this Matrix 4 where the black cat is actually named Deja Vu now. And so, boom, right there, another glitch in the Matrix with the black cat. And so when you see repeating animals or insects, know that it's a totem. It's a glitch, okay, in your projected experience that lets you know that you are indeed somehow trapped in a simulated Groundhog Day. Now, one of the last ways to know if you are paying your dues by way of a time loop is if you keep dating people with the same or similar names. Or maybe the glitch is that both of your parents have similar names, or they have similar birth dates, or similar favorite colors. So I'll give you an example with like the names. So say in one relationship loop, you dated a guy with the first name John. And then in the relationship loop after that, say the new guy's last name was Johnson. And then the next relationship after that, say the guy's nickname, growing up was Johnny Come Lately. And so you go in hoping that it will be different, not realizing that you are playing the same character in this new loop, whether it's, moving too fast, whether it's being dishonest, whether it's trying to make them your spouse, trying to have kids, jumping into sexual soul ties, and so on and so forth. And as a result of this habitual unconscious habit of sorts, you find yourself in a relationship loop where the same unhealed trauma energies are playing dress up in and through your bodysuit. And you find yourself on the same hamster wheel that is preventing you from experiencing your life abundantly, to keep you in this cycle, steady coming back to this illusory world, paying off an illusory debt unconsciously. And the thing about your enemy is they can't come up with new ideas on their own. You see, your enemy is an imitator, not a creator. We see this with the analyst who keeps Neo in a loop because Neo is focused on analyzing the what instead of the why. And oddly enough, Neo's paying the analyst to continue to analyze him. He's paying a debt. Now, the analyst even admits that some of the new ways that they are hijacking and possessing the avatars is based on what Neo showed them in one of his earlier loops where he stopped time when the bullets were coming. Now, if we take a look at this character, Bugs, I feel like she is the perfect example of what I was saying about someone having something similar or similar name or the animal totem, and how that's one way to know that you are stuck unconsciously in a cycle. Now notice her name is Bugs, which could be short for Bugs Bunny, which is relevant because she has the tattoo of the rabbit on her arm. And not only was that tattoo in a previous loop on a different avatar, but still moving along the same storyline. But to make it even more obvious, the word bunny is in fact an informal name for rabbit. And now Bugs, because she has studied the story of the One, is able to see spiritually what no one else was able to see, which was Neo trapped in a body again. She was also able to perceive, I'll say prophetically, her part in the story of the One. And likewise, my guess is that you probably have studied the Bible and the life of Yeshua the Christ. But my question to you is, do you know the story well enough to recognize it playing out in your own life? Do you know the Christ well enough to recognize him in another avatar? If he didn't look like the Jewish man from the first loop of the story, from the last time he was on earth, like how we see in the movie, how they've altered the code for Neo's avatar so he sees himself one way when everyone else is seeing an old man, a completely different version. And we see a similar thing with Trinity. And all of this is done to mask their true energetic identity, to try and stop the power of their love story, to try to hide the truth that Neo is the one and Trinity is the bride who is equal in partnership to the one. So could you recognize Christ in a woman's body, or in an Indian person's body, or in the appearance of a Latino child or an adult Asian, and so on? Can you see your real self in the mirror? Or are you only seeing who they told you that you are? The ego persona. Because all over this earth, the same story of the one has been on repeat. Just like we see all these different versions of Neo, there are different versions of the Christ all over the place. Scripture says Yeshua was the first of many brothers. And so in your current experience of what you call your life, can you recognize your character in the story of Christ, the anointed one? Take those same letters in one and rearrange them, and it spells Neo. And so, are you the Christ? Are you the bride, which is the embodiment of the Trinity and its oneness? Are you a friend of the bridegroom like John the Baptist was, or a Morpheus? Are you one of the other characters like a Paul or a Ruth, written in to point the way to the one? Are you energetically in your avatar spiritually coded as those who are Antichrist? Or are you playing the character of Lucifer, or perhaps the sheeple, which they mention in the movie? Or are you in fact AI and don't know it? I mean, I love the way we see Morpheus come back in the loop, and he's actually a program, which is not bad. I mean, Romans 9:21 says, does not the potter have the right to make out of the same lump of clay some pottery for special purposes and some for common use? Meaning, you probably don't remember this, but you wrote in all the characters. Not only that, all the characters are you. You are the potter, the creator. You just don't remember because you've been asleep, hidden in a body. We see here where Morpheus says to Neo, it's not every day that you meet your creator. And so, do you not have the right to make out of the same lump of clay? Meaning everything was made by you, and without you was nothing made that was made. Meaning it's all different forms and versions of you, because from you are all things and to you are all things. And the prince of this world knows who's inside of your avatar. He knows, and that's why he has tried so hard to keep you in your loop, on your hamster wheel. You see, the prince of this world wants to keep feeding you a false persona because he knows his time is short. And so he has to keep you believing that you are powerless, when in fact, it's all you. I put this quote in my last Matrix video because once you realize that all of it is just a form of manifestation that you've chosen to manifest as this animal. You've chosen to manifest as this human. You've chosen to manifest as this character. You've chosen to manifest as this plant, as this tree. You want it to be like a tree planted by the rivers of water. That's you in the tree. It's all you. And then and only then, when you realize this, can you take your power back like how Neo and Trinity are doing here with the analyst. Now, the reason your loop is still going, even though the Christ, or you, if you are one of the Christs, even though you overcame the game and remembered that you were the invisible God made visible in a human form. Now, the reason the loop is still going is because your bride was still plugged into the illusion mentally. And she is convinced that she is who and what her upbringing and age and status and pedigree has told her that she is. And so just like Neo gets out again and goes back in again for love to free his counterpart, you as God wanted to experience this love. And so you created this story where the balance of you and the spirit, this equilibrium, the oneness in the masculine essence and the feminine essence of God, where you said, let us make man in our image and likeness. And so you created a male and a female avatar, and you put your consciousness in them, and they, you, began acting out the story unconsciously. And I mean, what's a good story without some interesting plot twists, some nemesis, some struggle, some, as Neo says in this Matrix 4 documentary film, conflict. And so Neo and Trinity represent versions of the first Adam and the first Eve and their oneness. And so Neo and Trinity symbolically can be seen as the versions of the first Adam and Eve and the oneness between them, where they were taken from each other. Because again, it's the same quote unquote clay that you use for both of the characters of yourself. This is why in the movie, not only could they recognize Trinity, even though her coding played differently, because her energetic spiritual DNA was identical to Neo's. He even asked them, how is she reading? And they said, she reads like you. Because newsflash, she's not only your divine counterpart, but she is you. The two are indeed one flesh, just one. And so here in the storyline, we see you playing out your first loop with the first Adam and the first Eve. And here comes the analyst, which, if you haven't gathered already, is also you. Just another side of you created to keep a balance. But all of it is a programmed character that you created in the mind of you, God. And so we see here that even Trinity's husband and children are programs used by the other side, again, to keep her believing that she is someone that she is not. And I have to say, the family program, in my opinion, is one of the hardest and most deceiving. But the construct convinces you, blood is thicker than water and all of these different things. And it's like, no, wait a minute. That is not your real counterpart in that body. That is an invisible being designed only to steal, kill, and destroy you, Trinity. So here, when you wonder why those other relationships didn't work out, it's because those avatars are not what you think. Just like this girl here in the scene laying down, sleeping next to what I'm sure she thought was her quote unquote person, when all of a sudden they're hijacked to kill, and we see them jumping out of windows being used as weapons, designed to try and stop the inevitable full awakening of the bride and the bridegroom. Now, going back to what I was saying about the first Adam and the first Eve. Okay, so this was an earlier simulation of sorts, where the serpent energy, or another way we could say it is the serpent avatar being hijacked, was able to deceive the woman by talking to her. And, this is why we see the analyst making the comments over and over about the woman being controlled, saying, being controlled by the man, like, can't you control her? Because that's a program initiated by the serpent, where sheeple can be conditioned to believe that the woman is somehow less than the man. This is where the program was initiated, where in the scripture where it talks about how your desire will be for your husband and he will rule over you. It's the illusion that she is less than the God man, though she is God woman. And so, similar to the program Smith, that in the war we see when he's taken over Neo in The Matrix Reloaded, when Neo goes to the Machine City, he says, you know, Smith is out of control. And so he is sent back to fight him. And all of his clone energy, similar to the war scenes prophesied in the book of Revelation, it will be the invisible beings that are antichrist against the spirit of Christ and the collective energetic body that we all make up. And so this war has never been against flesh and blood. It's not against the avatars that are being unconsciously puppeted. The war has always been between God. The war has always been between you. And so this analyst, which I believe also carries the energetic code of Lucifer, because he mentions to Neo that he was there in the Machine City, just like, you know, Lucifer was there in quote unquote heaven in the beginning. We know that Lucifer, your creation, was a very beautiful invisible being. It's funny, the analyst even uses an apple again, which is also proof of the loop, because somewhere along the lines, I don't know, you know, what loop it was, where it was slightly altered to make us believe that the quote unquote forbidden fruit in the story was an apple. And so all that to say, the serpent added the conflict, added the twist in the story that you, of course, already knew would happen because you wrote the story, even though you programmed yourself to get amnesia when you entered your human avatar. You had already written in a failsafe where you would reinsert yourself into another avatar, only this time the experiment was more real. The test was more real. These are two words they use in the movie, but the stakes were higher this time because you came as a baby instead of a fully grown man. And you wanted to not remember so that the acting would be more believable. And you see, that's the thing about a good actor. They can play a role so intensely that they actually forget that they really aren't the character. It's almost like the energetic code of the character merges with the actual person to the point where they may even lose some of their remembrance of their identity before taking on said role, and have to, you know, go through therapy or some, you know, emotional soul detox to try to get back to who they were before the role. And so in your mind, in the mind of God, you created a failsafe where you'd plug yourself in again as the last Adam, as the Christ, and you would complete the loop, reconciling yourself again back to oneness with the last Eve, the bride of Christ, making sure that even before the karmic loop could have even began. You notice the part in the movie where Santi is helping them with how to unplug Trinity before the machines even realize what's happening so that she can be out of there. You made sure that before the karmic loop ever even began, before any of the repeating cycles were there that you had to pay off, the debt, you made sure that you wouldn't trap yourself in that matrix permanently in your unconscious mind. So what did you do? You caused the lamb to be slain even before the foundations of the world. So again, before the treadmill could even start, you paid all the debt that would be owed. And now you've been on this journey of remembering that you already paid the debt. And so the bounty, the price that the enemy is holding over your head is on all fronts an illusion. And so in all reality, the enemy is on borrowed time as you await the redemption of your love story experience that you began at your Genesis. So you, Christ, here you are, back in the matrix, after your bride, who is unconscious still, though she is awakening. We see Trinity questioning the game. And likewise, this is how you awaken. You have to question it. You have to consider and ponder and test the spirit by your spirit Like when Trinity talks about how when her husband laughed at her and she felt like punching him, but she also felt stupid because she laughed too. She played it off. It's like, downplaying yourself because you're surrounded by other people whose only objective is to keep you weak, to keep you broken, to keep your self-esteem low, to keep you dependent on them so that you can play by their rules and they can feel like the character of God over you. But even that, coming from your spouse, your partner, your family, your friends, these ones close to you, is still part of the master plan to lead you into remembrance. And now it's really important to note here that you designed it where the person's choice wouldn't be taken from them. And so this is why we see that Neo can't just tell her. She has to know for herself. And so he speaks to her in code. And that is what you did with the Bible for your bride. You wrote it in coded language. And so Neo, like the Christ, is back here hoping that the bride will remember the love that they had at first, and that she too would see how far she's fallen. We see here Neo explains to the analyst what will happen if the bride chooses love. Because if she doesn't remember her first love, then Neo is crucified again, so to speak, and is resurrected again in the Matrix loop all over again, in a different bodysuit again, all to repeat the same loop again. And that's why the choice is so important. You have to choose Christ in your heart, not in your head. And then once the eye of your heart is opened, you're able to open your mind's eye. And from there, you step back into your God identity. Because as a man thinketh, not in his head, but in his heart, so is he. And so Christ is the pathway back to you consciously remembering that you are God hiding in a body. And now that brings us back to another clue that you left for yourself. See, the stories in the Bible are to you like the modal Neo created as, again, a failsafe for himself. You just have to fully turn and go all the way back and remember that the parts of the story are here, but again, they've been altered to make you think you're crazy. Just like Neo says in the film, how can they be hiding, the fact that he's back in the Matrix when it's in plain sight? I mean, he's the maker of a game called The Matrix. It's just like how they have used your inspired book against you to weaponize you against yourself. But really, it's all you. And it's been all you since the beginning. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with you, and the Word was you, and that Word became flesh again. That's your first Adam and Eve loop. And when you remember this, you break free from the game. And as you've already written it for yourself, then you decide to create a new heaven and a new earth again. Kind of like how Trinity and Neo, when, they talk about the new Matrix they will make, where perhaps, the sky will be painted as a rainbow, and they jokingly say how easy it is to forget. You too eventually overcome all of the gaslighting, all of the deception, all of the wool pulled over your eyes, and you begin to silence the other outside voices. And like Trinity's dream, what if some of your prophecies and visions and dreams are actually memories from another loop repeating, kind of like how the other Matrix during Noah's time panned out? And then we saw the rainbow. There's that rainbow again. The rainbow was there. You set the rainbow as a sign. You just have to remember. I mean, how many communions do you have to ritually do in remembrance of you to remember you? I'm just asking. And speaking of remembrance, I love the part where Trinity says she remembers. And so, like the character Morpheus says to Neo that he is learning about himself and about Neo, the quote unquote manual that the previous versions of himself left behind as the clues, as again the fail safe, as the way to get out of the mind maze. you have to relearn about yourself. But learn about it knowing that it's you. You have to lose the life that you know to be yours in your mind, the person you're thinking that you are, your mental age, your gender, your race, your ethnicity, so that you may find your real life and identity outside of the matrix of the mind, and realize that the real you has no age, no gender, no race, no ethnicity, that it's all been programmed onto your mind's mainframe. It's like a computer program would upload, default settings to a new computer or a refurbished computer. How they go back to the default settings. Now, speaking of going back to default settings, I want to talk a little bit about the new Smith and some of the quick fun symbolism I noticed were glitches in the Matrix loop that played out in different ways in this Matrix 4 documentary, meaning the parallels in the loops are able to remain disguised, again, though it's the same invisible energetic beings at play. So it's the same spirits on repeat. They just seem to try to manifest slightly different to keep you thrown off in the loop. And so the character of Smith reminds me of a mixture of the Antichrist energy as well as Satan's energy. Notice all of the one-on-one conversing between Neo and the old Smith and the other matrices, as well as in this one. It's so reminiscent of the character of the devil, who, when Yeshua was led into the desert by the spirit and Satan came to tempt him, and literally they have this whole back and forth conversation. I mean, if we look at the dichotomy between these two characters, it almost appears that they are two different sides of the same coin, even up to where Neo allows Smith to become one with him, because in reality it's all one, because it's all you playing out different versions of yourself in different characters. It's all happening in your mind, the duality, the wrestling between light and dark, yin and yang, the balance of all that you are. They're both you wrestling within yourself. And just like the actor we know as Keanu Reeves was probably honored to play Neo, so was Jonathan Groff, I'm sure, honored to play Agent Smith. Because it's all a simulation designed for you to remember it's you. You are at war within yourself, God. And through the pathway of the Christ experiences with his 12 disciples or 12 disciplines, you are able to get back to you. Christ is your greatest failsafe, your favorite modal that you designed to show yourself back to the truth of your real life, not the mind-generated, projected one. And so, the war against the artificial parts of you, the made-up versions of you, is all the war within the mind. It's the battlefield of your mind. And as you pass through these dimensions of tribulation in the mind, and you go through your process of finding your 1,000 years of peace on earth, which is really just another day for you, as you have had your other days that you speak of through your character Moses in Genesis. It's peace on your land, the land of your life, your universe. And so this character Smith is representative of the prince of the power of the air. He is the spiritual character that is puppeting humanity. I mean, one could even question whether what we know as Earth or this planet is actually hell disguised. I mean, after all, Satan is the one running the loop. I mean, after all, he was cast here, where we're at, right? And we know that in the story that you left yourself, you said that the Christ went down to preach to those souls who had been imprisoned from Noah's time. This is in 1 Peter 3:19-20. Christ went and preached to those who had been lost in the flood. All of this was to ensure that not only would you be released from your mind's prison, but all karmic debt would be paid in full. Now, what makes me think of the Antichrist entity is the part where Smith's mind is unlocked and he remembers who he is. It's like, does the Antichrist energy know that their character is here to play out the role of the Antichrist grouping? And if so, I wonder when that was unlocked for them. Or do these ones know from the very beginning that they are of the Antichrist energy? Kind of like how Santi always knew that she was a program. Either way, everyone is playing their role in this story, whether they consciously know it or not. And if you can find yourself in the book, then you will find yourself out of the loop. Now, in closing, I want to just share with you some fun facts I noticed from the documentary film. For example, I love the neologist who is a fanatic of the previous stories of old of the One. I mean, he even asks him if it's true that he could fly. I imagine that's how it would be being around the first Christ. It would be like asking him something like, hey, did you actually walk on water? In which case he would say, yes. I also love how the 1,000 years of peace brought a unity between them and the machines, and that because the machines don't speak like human avatars, they speak as, sentient avatars. The movie shows how the communication for all God beings still is universal. It's with the mind's eye. And believe it or not, other entities that exist, such as what we call extraterrestrials, for example, will also communicate with you through this God eye. And I'll just give you this quick tip. As you open your God eye, just know it may look kind of cloudy at first, depending on the calcification and how much sleep is stuck in your eye. Like how, if you wake up and you got sleep kind of stuck in your eyes, it's hard to open. Maybe you have allergies and you itch them and now they're swollen and it kind of form that, I don't know what that liquid is, until all those little juices kind of built up around your lashes and it's like hard to open it. Yeah, I don't know. It reminds me of that. Another fun thing I enjoyed in the movie was how the old machine model was complaining about its race and how, the older machines were more sophisticated and, now, there's been this reducing of them and they no longer actually talk, it's just beep, beep, beep. And, he's imitating how we're always on our phone texting. And this is just letting us know what we already know, that AI is definitely on the move and rapidly growing. And in the event that you are wondering who's really hijacked or who's really real, well, word on the woke streets from those slanging this illegal knowledge out here in revelation and interpretation, they say that the different types bleed differently. So you see here in the movie where the hijacked ones bleed green. There are some among us who bleed different colors. But ultimately, I just want you to know that it's not even something you have to worry about. Let the weed and tares grow together, as to not accidentally uproot the wheat while trying to gather up the tares to be burned. Another interesting comparison that I noticed was how they said it had been 60 years for Neo. So Neo had been going in this loop. He had been in this circle running in place for 60 years. Sounds a lot like the children of Israel to me. Okay? Going around in a circle for 40 years, stuck in the wilderness of their mind. Another thing I liked was how in the first Matrix, Neo recalls the place he used to go and eat noodles. And he asks the truth of what it means when they were in the car together. And Trinity says that the Matrix can't tell you who or what you are. And here we see Neo at the place, or at least him in a later loop at the place eating noodles. But because it has already happened, we find out about it before it actually takes place. Kind of like how we know, again, the lamb was slain before the foundations of the world, even though the manifestation of it actually played out energetically wise only about 2,000 years ago. Now, I also found Jada Pinkett Smith's character fascinating in that after all she had witnessed, like all of the miracles she was privy to seeing and experiencing with her own eyes, she still found herself in this place of unbelief. And not only that, but she had actually backslid from her original stance of faith in Neo that she took all those years ago. And when Bugs, who is just like she was back in those days when she was, you know, as they say, on fire for God, radical, she tells her how she cares more about growing fruit than unplugging souls. And it made me think of the prophecy in Matthew 24:12 that says, because of the increase of wickedness, the love of many shall wax cold. And speaking of prophecies, I also enjoyed the part where Trinity talks about the dream she had, only to find out she was seen in part regarding her future. Now, this concept is interesting given that Trinity died in the last Matrix and is here in the resurrection. Now, two thoughts on that. One, death is an illusion. It's a program. And two, because Trinity is one with the Christ, her story will mirror his because they are twins, not opposites. Like Neo and Smith, who are opposites, Trinity and Neo, they're two pieces of the same whole. They're one whole that was separated only to be brought back together to make the whole. And so, like her counterpart Neo, her loop also consisted of a crucifixion and a resurrection. And last, another fun thing I noticed was Jude, who embodies the essence of Judas in scripture who betrayed Yeshua. We see Judas is planning to bring with him those who will capture Neo. And I love how Bugs has the revelation of this and gives it to Neo, similarly to how Jesus, Yeshua, in the biblical story, gets privy to the information on who is going to betray him while he's there, you know, eating at the Last Supper. Jude also carries the energy of Mouse in the first Matrix, who made the introduction for Neo and the other programmed woman, the lady in the red dress, and was, you know, even trying to offer him a more, you know, a closer, more intimate introduction. And likewise here, Jude makes the introduction for Neo and the program version of Trinity, Tiffany, or, you know, Tiff, as her friends call her. I mean, even how he talks about Tiff in the kind of, you know, sexual manner, talking about the MILF and all that, we hear a similar energetic sound when Mouse talks about the needs, you know, what the body needs and all of the different things he says about the woman in the red dress. Well, I hope this video reaches the part of you that is obvious to those who want to keep your identity hidden because it benefits them. That the very one churches preach about and worship leaders sing about has been you all along. You're the one. Because indeed, there is only one. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is above all and through all and in you all. Ephesians 4:5-6. How much is left after all? I'm here to remind you that the book is a mirror and the reflection is indeed you.